Success. There's something about that word that drives us. It pushes us. It feeds us. From books and podcasts and TV shows and seminars, people go to extreme lengths to learn how to be successful. But what if success is all around you? What if there's people in your everyday life that you pass by, talk to at the grocery store, maybe even your next door neighbor, that are highly successful people? Well, I believe they're out there, and I'm going to make it my mission to find them, ask them questions, hear their stories, find out how they got there, and ultimately learn from them. And I'd like to bring you along on that journey with me. So join me as we tell stories, share some laughs, and find out what it takes to be highly successful in this world. I'm Josh Waters, and these are your keys to success. Today we're talking with Ryan Williams, a local pastor and great friend of mine. Ryan's going to take us along with him on his journey as he leaves everything to start fresh on his success story. We talk about having a good foundation, asking questions, and not going at it alone. This is Episode 2, Leave Everything and Follow Me. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and where you came from?
Yeah. So, pretty clearly, I'm not having an American accent on this. And so, I grew up in South Australia and grew up in a pretty middle-class, blue-collar home. Dad's a truck driver. Mum worked in a bank. And so, don't get more just, kind of straight working-class, middle-class than that. And, went to public school, pretty normal upbringing, played Australian rules football. That was something that I really wanted to be successful at, and I wanted to have, great success. I wanted to go pro and do all of this kind of stuff. And pretty quickly into kind of college, realized that I probably wasn't going to go pro, but I still loved the game and still wanted to play it, but ended up getting plagued with injuries and had some knee surgeries at the end of a season, and just kind of was told, hey man, your knees are so old, you shouldn't walk upstairs, let alone play like high level sports. And so that kind of totally wrecked my whole identity, my whole life, man. I thought I was going to be, that was everything to me. And when it was taken away, just through physical kind of struggles and my body breaking down, spent about a year not really knowing like who I was, what I wanted to do. Just kind of worked a very normal job. I was in a warehouse, picking orders and stocking shelves and doing things like that. And eventually, my folks pulled me aside and were like, hey man, I don't want you to spend the rest of your life working in a warehouse, just doing nothing. And so I began to think, okay, well, I gotta find success somewhere else. I gotta find, something that I'm good at. And so I decided I want to find it in a uniform. And so I actually joined the Australian Federal Police, and I believed that, man, I can be, it's kind of like, at least for me, at the age I was like, man, this is kind of a morally virtuous thing to do. People would respect me, so there'd be that communal and relational kind of like, man, that's an important job, as well as doing a good job while I was doing it. And so found myself working in a role as a protective services officer, doing kind of, our role was counterterrorism first response. It sounds way cooler than it was, but the idea was that, hey, we were there to be the first line of defense if there was anything really bad that was going to happen. And so I worked at a defense facility in Australia that provided site security, provided people security, things like that. Got to work the government job. It was a good career. By all accounts, my life was successful. Things were going really, really well. I was just about to buy my first home. Had a pretty stable girlfriend. Good friends, good social life, good professional life. Financially, I was making enough money to do whatever I wanted to do. It was still pretty empty though. Every time I got what I thought I wanted, whether it be, I got the girl, or, I went and got a new car because I wanted a new car, or, I wanted a new place to live, or I wanted a new stereo system or whatever. And, I had the financial means to do it, and I would figure out a way to make it happen. Every time I'd get it, it would be good for a little bit, a couple of weeks or even up to a couple of months, be like, yeah, man, this is great. I'm doing really good. And then the shine would kind of wear off, right? And all of a sudden it wasn't quite as fulfilling as I thought it was going to be. It was just kind of this perpetual cycle of life that I was living, just chasing kind of things for fulfillment, and they never really were able to fulfill kind of one of the deepest, satisfactions of my heart. And I was just chatting with a bloke at work, and it was night shift, and so it's the middle of the night, and interestingly, not much goes on in the middle of the night. And so he was just talking. Ended up talking to me about the Bible. And I'd kind of grown up in the church a little bit and thought, oh, yeah, I know a little bit about it, but I'd kind of rejected it in my teenage years, wasn't real interested, and I'm in my 20s at this point. And, and he was just really chill. He wasn't this, like, Ned Flanders type, or, he wasn't this hardcore, like, oh, man, you got to, turn or burn or anything. But he was just saying, hey, man, like, I lived a pretty similar life to yours. He's like, I dropped out of school, joined the Navy, have done whatever I wanted, sought out after everything that I ever wanted, and ultimately it didn't fulfill me. And then he's like, then I started to develop a relationship with God, and that began to change him. And so I kind of left that conversation, just kind of wheels turning, and started to read my Bible again for the first time ever, like on my own, without having to be told to or have to do it for some confirmation class or something that I had to do as a kid. And I kind of just read the first verse, which is Genesis 1:1, right? Like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And it kind of stopped me in my tracks a little bit, because it meant that I'd drive around, I'd look at all these wondrous things that God had made, the mountains and the trees and all of these really, really cool things. And I was like, man, God just made those. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I'd look up to the stars. And I'd had this kind of like moment of self-reflection. I can remember it so clearly to this day, where I was like, man, if God made all of this, and he just did it because he wanted to. He can do whatever he wants. Like, I'm living like I'm God. Like, I do whatever the heck I want. I don't care about anybody else. I want to get a new girlfriend, I get a new girlfriend. I want a new car, I get a new car. I want anything that I'm seeking to fulfill me, I just go and do it. I kind of had this moment where I was like, man, I'm kind of trying to be like God. Like I'm trying to be the one that fulfills his own, does his own thing. I'm free from anything else. And then I looked at the mountains and I looked at the stars, and I was like, but I can't do that. And I was like, well, if God is who he says he is, that means he's big and I'm small. And I need to start reckoning with him in my life. And it took a couple of months after that, actually. I just was reading a bit more of my Bible and just kind of doing all this other stuff. And, just kind of exploring Christianity, exploring, who Jesus was and his claims. And eventually found myself, one day I was just at home. The TV was on, for some reason it was on the Christian channel, and there was a televangelist of all craziness that could ever have happened. And this guy just preached about Jesus, and at the end he's like, hey man, if you want to know Jesus, get on your knees, turn from your sin, trust in Jesus. And that's exactly what I did. And I was like in my early mid-20s, and I became a Christian, and I didn't really know what it meant, but all of a sudden, like those desires to go, party and to, just get something new or something extra, they kind of went away. And I eventually got plugged into a great church, and, I was talking to one of the pastors there, and he was like, yeah, man, I think you became a Christian. Like, I think God has fulfilled those parts of you that are searching for something greater than yourself, or searching for satisfaction. Like, the only place that we can be satisfied is when God meets us and actually restores us to a right relationship with him through Christ. And I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. And so I kept working with the federal police for a few years after that, actually, but began to feel more and more called to learn more and more about God, and started doing some studies, and then kind of began this sense of like a call to maybe being a pastor, which was crazy, right? Because I'm in like a great career. I've got great family. I've got all this stuff that I could ever want, and now I've got like my spiritual area is full and fulfilled. I'm serving at the local church, but it just didn't seem right. I felt like God wanted me to become a pastor, and so I actually left the federal police, quit my job, and went and became a poor Bible college student, which was like the most insane thing you can do, right? You leave financial security, you leave relational security. I moved from the town I was in back to a town that had a Bible college, and kind of like got rid of all of that, and then found out that I really, really hated it. I really didn't like being a full-time student. I really didn't like being at Bible college. It was a weird environment, especially kind of somebody with my story coming in, just haven't been in the world, haven't been in a career, and then coming just like not doing that anymore. So eventually I just decided, man, I'm like, if I'm going to be a pastor, I got to go serve in a local church, be involved in a local church. And so ended up taking up an internship opportunity here in the US, moved to the Seattle area, became not just a poor Bible college student, now an unemployed intern at a church. And so I wasn't allowed to work. I wasn't allowed to earn any money because of my visa. And so I literally had a little bit of money, and I took care of that, and that was it.
Heard parts of that, but I don't know if I've heard that like story fully all the way through.
Sure.
And one of the things that I picked up on is you read it on your own. You started digging in on your own.
Yeah.
I find that people start to become more successful when it's not a project. It's not something that's been pushed on you. Even if you're in like business school, it's not a class. It's when you want to dig in. You start digging in on your own.
Man, I think there's just something about that. Like, unless you're like actually like interested in what you're doing, and like your gifts and your desires kind of align, then you're not going to be successful at it, man. Like it's just not going to happen that way. Because like if you don't have like the passion for it, or the desire to learn more or grow more or dig in and become better at something, and then you also don't have the gifts that would align with that passion, I don't think that you're going to have success in any area of your life while those two things are at odds with one another.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just not going to work. Like for you, man, you're in business, right? Like if you didn't care about business, but you're extremely gifted in business, well, that's not going to actually be any good for you either, right? Like you need those two things to be in line with one another so that you can really let your gifts and your passion kind of connect, and then let them bring about something that would be successful.
Yeah, and I love that you use the word passion.
Yeah.
You hear that a lot from successful people, passion. I had passion for it. And I think the definition of the word, when people hear passion, they think of like fun, good times, but that's not the technical definition of the word. It's the suffering. It literally means to suffer for something.
Yeah.
So it's to push, to suffer, and you're happy about it.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of that Harry Potter. You're going to suffer, but you're going to be happy about it, which is you are. When you love something and you're passionate about it, you're putting in the work, you're putting in the blood, the sweat, the tears. You're broke, you don't have a job, you leave everything, but you're more fulfilled because of that passion.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about passion, like how we've like somehow divorced the idea of like success and endurance is insane. I think we've become enamored with the like overnight success. We've become enamored with, the person that kind of just like is in the right place at the right time, and look at them, man. They didn't even really try very hard, and look how successful they are.
Yeah.
That's absolutely the exception. I mean, that's the 0.01% of successful people. The everyone minus that, they have endured hard times to be successful in the role that they're in or whatever they're doing.
And I feel like most of those people, you either aren't seeing the work they put in.
No.
You're not seeing the decade, the 20 years that they put in to get to that point.
It's the iceberg principle, right?
Yeah.
All the work they've done is under the water. You just see the little bit poking out the
little top.
Yeah.
Or they are an overnight success, and that there's no foundation. It's going to collapse.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's, the whole principle of the build your house on the sand, build your house on the rocks.
Totally.
We were talking about that one with my kids, and they were kind of like digging into like, all right, how like it applies to more than one thing. My son is 9, so wheels are starting to turn around those things.
Yeah.
And I was like kind of explaining it's more than just like your spiritual, it's your financial, it's your personal, it's your learning. Like if you don't know basic math, you can't advance anymore.
Exactly.
Because you don't have a foundation.
No.
You kind of hinted that you thought it was a little crazy to leave everything, which do you feel looking back? Like at the time, it probably felt like, what am I doing? Like looking back, does it feel like it was a crazy thing, or does it like hindsight is 2020? How do you feel about it now?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was it was almost like you can do no other. That's kind of at least what I thought about. Like, man, this was like, to me at least, the path that I was on. Like I could have, so, I mean, the part of the story I didn't tell was like, hey, like when I left the federal police, they didn't want me to leave. Like, so I was actually offered like 2 to 3 jobs with the Australian Federal Police. Now, number one, they'd invested a lot of time, energy, and money into me as an employee as well. And so, but, man, there was like a lot, of just clarity that I had, also a lot of peace that I had, that I just knew, man, like this was the right thing. Like I knew that I needed to follow the Lord, and I knew that I needed to sell everything I owned and follow Him. So sold 2 houses, sold my car, sold a bunch of stuff, sold everything that I had. I mean, like I think I've got like a couple of books left in Australia that I would own, and my parents are trying to get them out of the house right now as well. So, but at the time I was like, I just knew that that's what God was calling me to. Although I knew at the same time, like, man, it was just crazy to do. And so there was it's almost this dual reality. I'm aware of the reality, but I'm also aware that for me, that's what I needed to do. And it gave me a conviction to say, hey, even when times were tough, even when things were difficult, and even when, you're like, you got no money, you can't earn any money, and you're just kind of living off a finite amount of savings, I had a peace that said, this is where I need to be right now. And I knew that God was going to provide in one way or another. Turns out He provided by keeping me in the US, and I was provided with a wonderful wife, and then I was provided with a job that was far more than I ever expected that I would ever get when I first got out here. So
it all kind of starts falling together, and there's struggle and push. For me personally, I feel that your spiritual should come first. If your spiritual's a mess, and your personal's a mess, which I would put spiritual, personal, because if you can't keep yourself together, you can't keep your family together. You can't keep yourself together without spiritual. And if you can't keep your family together, what's the point of money?
The rest is a facade.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it's going to the foundation's wrong, right? Like we just talked about, like unless your spiritual life is ordered, your home life, your personal life with, primarily your spouse, or whoever your significant other is, and then your family, like if those things are chaos, you can keep a facade of business and financial prosperity, but ultimately that's going to undermine, and it's all going to fall down in time. You can do it for a small time, right? It's a house of cards. You can make it stand for a small time, but it's got no structural.
And it's not real success.
No.
It's you're not going to bed at night and breathing deep and falling asleep. Your wheels are turning.
I mean, for what would it profit a man if he would gain the whole world yet lose his soul?
Yeah.
Right? What would it profit a man if he gains great financial success but loses his family?
Yeah.
For what would it profit a man if he gets a promotion but loses his wife?
Yeah.
It's false success, man. For what? Just for you? No, I mean, you were never meant to be successful just for you.
Yeah.
Any blessing you have is to be shared with those that God's placed in your life.
Yeah. It reminds me of there's a song that the chorus lyrics are, he was the richest man in the cemetery. And the whole song is about how this guy, he had a big business, he was very wealthy, and then he died and his family didn't show up.
Yeah.
He was the richest man in the cemetery, but when it comes down to it, who gives a shit?
Exactly, man.
Right?
Exactly, dude. What's the point?
Yeah.
Cool, you got a lot of money. You're not necessarily rich just because you have a lot of money.
Yeah. And I think the money does come with, if you focus on the other things, I think the finances come. If you focus on the relationships, you focus on building yourself and building your business properly, the money is it's an effect of that. The money is
a fruit of it, right?
Yeah. The money comes because you've been a good steward, you've worked hard in these other things, and the money is a gift from that. Not the money comes from the money comes first.
It should work that way, and it often does work that way, but sometimes it doesn't as well, right? I think it's just the nature of living in a broken world, is that sometimes you do everything right and then you get screwed over by your business partner, on the evening of the big, making it big, right?
Yeah.
That happens as well. And do we have satisfaction, or are we lost when that happens? Can we endure through that as well, knowing that there's still we can still have success even if things don't work out the way that they should work out.
So what advice would you give to somebody if they were, they're pursuing, especially somebody starting out? I think that's probably what a lot of anybody listening to this is probably starting out in their success journey. And it's a lot, especially when you kind of are at the base level and none of these 5 keys are they're all at like 2s.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get something to a 10.
Yeah, yeah.
What would because I would say your expertise is on the spiritual key. What would you say to build that? Where would you start?
Yeah, like nobody goes from a 2 to a 10.
No.
So you got to go to 3, then a 4, then a 5, right? It's got to be linear, right? Like there's no microwaving, any of those areas of success. Like you've got to do the work to move your way up, right?
There's steps. Go start at the bottom of a flight of steps and try to jump to the top. You're going to wreck your face.
It's not going to work, right? Like
you're going to get hurt.
So like take the time to develop where you're at. I would say primarily like you're not alone, and if you are alone, you'll probably never get to the top.
Yeah.
And I remember, man, like just spending a lot of time with older guys who were at the 8, 9, 10 on these different areas, and asking them a lot of questions. Hey, what do I need to do to get to the next step? I remember being in a car. I was driving back from Canada with a pastor I was working with, and he's a dear friend, and he's a guy that I've learned a lot from. I remember saying like, hey man, where do I need to grow in my theological understanding? Where do I need to grow in my pastoral application? Where do I need to grow in that? And I had him for like 3 hours in the car. And I was like, all right, man, these next 3 hours, I'm grilling you because I want to know, and I want you to share how you've grown. And I would just take notes, man, just write down. He's like, okay, man, I think you need to develop in this area of theology. Hey, what book should I read then? What podcast should I listen to? What are some things that I need to think about? How do I develop in these areas? And then being about that, right? Like not just letting it land on and kind of be written on a piece of paper somewhere that's thrown down, but like actively turn it into a checkbox list. Like read this book, listen to this podcast, spend some time thinking about this, and then go back to that person and say, hey, can I talk to you more about it? And kind of work with them in that. Like none of us, there's not one successful person that's done it on their own. Ever. Like even in you look at the great business moguls of America like Carnegie, and you look at these like JP Morgan and these guys, like they were not alone. Now they were at the head, they were the kind of at the forefront, right? But like they worked with people, Henry Ford, these other guys who have like developed empires and developed industries. They've all worked together with other people, and they've always had people mentoring them ahead of them as well.
Yeah.
And so like don't think you can figure this all out on your own. Like you need actually not just even like you don't even just need podcasts or books. You need actual people who you can ask real questions to. Yeah. And I've actually found that the people who are at the 8, 9, 10 are incredibly willing to meet with somebody at the 2, 3 and help them navigate those next few steps. Yeah. Yeah.
I love asking questions. That's how, because I am not a I'll listen to books, but I am not a classroom learner. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So in my start of real estate, it's been about a decade. They don't teach you what you need to know in real estate school. They teach you how to try to not get sued. Uh-huh. So I ask questions. Yeah. I constantly, everybody I was asking questions. And I never once had anybody say, no, you're an idiot. I'm not answering that question. Nobody ever thought I was dumb. They were happy. And they were like, and now that I'm a decade in and I have realtors come to ask me questions, I'm like, heck yeah, let's talk about it. Let me tell you how to do it. So you're not out there guessing. Yeah. Ask questions. And I try to encourage my kids. I'm going to give my wife credit because she gets the credit for this one. It's super cool. She started, if the kids ask a question, or if I ask a question, or if she does, no matter how ridiculous the question is, she writes it on a sticky note and she puts it on the fridge. So sometimes it's not it's not an appropriate time to answer whatever ridiculous question, but we answer them and we try to get to, like, my daughter's one of the ones up there is, do hobbits have 2 stomachs? Because we watched the series.
Totally right, yeah.
But I feel like asking questions it's not only like the first place to start, but it's the only place to start.
Totally. Right? Like communal knowledge is how we have developed as a society, right? Like there's this saying in the theological world that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And the idea is that how we think and what we think about God and how we understand our Bibles and the good work that's been done in academia over 2,000 years exists so that the product that we have and the things that we have and the access that we have to the Bible and to theological thought and our ability to understand God and walk with Him and walk in spiritual disciplines has been developed over a long time. Like you don't just figure it out on your own. What you think and how you understand like comes from a long lineage of thought, and in every area of our life, in every area that we want to be successful in, you need to try and understand that lineage of thought, and then by the grace of God, there's going to be a time where you can add to that. But when you're at step 2 and 3, you're not adding to any lineage of thought. You just need to begin to develop and understand it in a greater way, so that there will be a time where you can see and grasp and understand and make sense of it, so you can make wise decisions, and then eventually you might be able to add to it.
Yeah. So I got a couple rapid fire questions for you. I did not prep you for these, so I don't prep it. I think they're pretty fun though, to catch people off the cuff.
Cool. All right.
So if you could go back just for a second and give your young self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Man, dude, because I've got too many thoughts, man. I'm usually not lost for words, but I think it would be, I'd probably go back to the Ryan that showed up in the US, and would just let him know, like keep staying the course, like it'll be okay. Because there was a lot of hard times, moving to another country, getting married, having a child with some special needs, going through some really hard, difficult ministry times. I think it would just be like a word just to stay faithful, stay the course, right?
Cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
more of an encouragement than I've done that, but it would be more of an encouragement to say, hey, just keep hanging in there, man.
Yeah. So, one book that was influential, what would that be?
Knowing God by J.I. Packer. It's a great, it's a small, easily accessible book about God, and it's a book about different things. It's actually articles that he wrote for a magazine that were collated together, really answering questions about who God is and how do we relate with God. And so, Knowing God by J.I. Packer. He passed away a few years ago, but a really, really helpful book, and really, really transformational for me in my ministry, and also just in my walk as a Christian.
I stole this one from a different podcast, but I love the question, so there's no original ideas anyways.
Yeah.
If you could have one gift or talent that you don't currently have, you could just snap your fingers and get it, what would it be?
Man, I would love to be more organizationally savvy. Not in the sense of like organizing my emails, but like seeing and making sense of operational and organizational problems. I'm just not really gifted like that. I feel like I can do the leadership stuff. I can do the like rallying people and drawing people into an idea, and I'm good at coming up with ideas. I'm pretty creative. But when it comes to actually like figuring out how we're going to do that, what staff we need and what people we need, that's an area of weakness. And so I'd really like to be a little bit more organizationally like astute in that way.
I think that was it.
All right, man.
That was good, man. That was fun.
Yeah, man. That's good. That's good.
I definitely appreciate you sitting down with me. It is a new venture that I've started, and it's mostly for myself, we'll be honest.
Cool.
This is for me to, like we talked about, learn and ask questions. Yeah. And I just figured there's got to be other people out there that may want to hear and ask questions, and they might just be afraid to sit down with people that are successful and ask them questions. So
cool, man.
That's what I'm doing. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, bro. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. All right, everybody, thank you for tuning in. If you did, there will be more success podcasts, and we'll have some fun together. Thanks, guys. Bye.